Okay, the first thing that we need to talk about when we're talking about rounding is place value, because when you round, you're always given a place to which you are supposed to round. So to the nearest whole number, or to the nearest 10, or to the nearest 100th, or whatever. Like, they'll tell you the place value to which you're supposed to round the number. So that's the first part of this, is making sure that you understand the place value and where you're supposed to round. Here's sort of a little basic 3 on each side of the decimal. So we've got that decimal point that anchors us. On the left of the decimal point will be whole numbers, right? Okay, the first place to the left are the ones. And if you are asked to round to the nearest whole number, that means you are rounding to the ones place, to the nearest whole number in the ones place. Okay? And then to the left of the ones is the tens place. So the nearest tens, you would round to the second place to the left of the decimal. And then the hundreds place is the third place to the left. So if we sort of put in a make-believe number, it's not make-believe, but okay, the 1 would be in the hundreds place, the 3 is in the tens place, and the 2 is in the ones place. That would be our nearest whole number. Typically at your age, like in 7th grade, 8th grade, you will be asked to round to the whole number or to decimal places. So you're not going to be often asked to round to tens or hundreds. You'll either be asked to round to whole numbers or to decimal places. So remember, the first place to the right of the decimal is the tenths place with the TH on the end. Okay, the first to the right of the decimal, the first place to the right is the tenths. And then the hundredths. And finally, the thousandths place. So if you're asked to round to any of those places, that's the order they go. Tenths place, hundredths place, and then thousandths place. So if we put, I don't know, just make up numbers. Okay, the 7 would be in the tenths place, the 8 would be in the hundredths place, and the 4 would be in the thousandths place. So being able to identify the place value is the first step in rounding, because if you can't identify the place value, you're not going to be able to round correctly, okay? Here's a little rounding rhyme to help keep the steps in your head. Here we go. Step 1, underline the place value and look next door. That means if you are rounding to the tenths, you underline that number that's in the tenths place. Or the hundredths, you would underline the hundredths place. So underline the place value of where you're asked to round. Okay, and then it says look next door. This means look to the right. So you're going to underline where you're rounding to, and you're going to look to the right, to the number that's directly to the right of that place value. If it's 5 or above, add 1 more. So if the number that's to the right is 5 or greater, your underlined number goes up 1. Okay, you add 1 more to your underlined place value. And if it's 4 or below, just ignore. So if you have your underlined place value, you look next door to the right. If that number next door is 4 or less, you just leave the number that's underlined the same. You don't change it at all. You just ignore it, as our rhyme says. Okay, so 5 or above, add 1 more. 4 or below, just ignore. Leave it the same. You make no change. That's the rhyme. Door, more, and ignore. And then this does not rhyme. Everything to the right of the number that you underlined, of the place value, once you've figured out your correct rounding, everything to the right becomes a 0. And if it's past the decimal point, everything it goes away. You don't have to put 100 zeros past the decimal point.
Now we have to wrap it.
I will not wrap it, but someone else can wrap it.
Me?
All right, so this one is asking us to round to the nearest hundredth. Okay, meaning it's going to be a decimal place because it is the hundredth with the TH on the end. Hundredth, it'll be a decimal place. Here's our number, 15.436. According to our rhyme, and I want you to practice doing this, the first step is to underline the place value. So which number is in the hundredths place? John?
3.
The 3. Underline the place value. This is the number that we need to round. So 3 is either going to stay the same or it is going to round up based on the number next door. So we look to the right. If it's 5 or above, we add one more. If it's 4 or below, we just ignore. What should we do here? Lily, we need to add one more because 6 is greater than 5. That means we add one more to our underlined place value. So rounded to the nearest hundredth, this number is 15.44. Okay? Now, I didn't put this, but remember we said everything to the right of the place value becomes a 0. So technically that 6 becomes a 0. You can put it, but you do not have to. Okay, let's do another one. Round to the nearest whole number. What place value do we need to underline here? What did we say the nearest whole number we underline? Hazen? So technically, which number should we underline?
Oh,
The 5, exactly, right? Because, yes, it is the 15, but the part of that we're going to round is the 5. So we underline the place value, look next door. So look to the right. If it's 5 or above, we add one more. If it's 4 or below, we just ignore. So Charlie, rounded to the nearest whole number, what would this be?
16.
If it's 4 or below,
Oh, whoops. Sorry.
what would it be? 15. It's going to stay the same. We just ignore.
But you still write the 4 point or the.
So then we said everything to the right becomes a 0. So technically it'd be 0.000. Do we need to write all the zeros?
No. Yes.
No. You can, but technically 15.000 is just 15. Okay? All right, let's do another one. Ooh. Okay, round to the nearest tenth. Round to the nearest tenth is the same one, 15.436. Which digit is in our tenths place in this number? Dane, which digit is in our tenths place? What? 4. Okay, underline the tenths place. Look next door. What do we do with the 4? What's going to happen with the 4? Bridget? We just ignore. It's going to stay the same because next door is a 3. That doesn't bump it bigger. So rounded to the nearest tenths place, this number would become what? 15.4. And then, 0, 0. Do we have to put the 2 zeros? No.
You can just put 15.
We can just say 15.4. Because when you're rounding to the tenths place, the place that you end with would be the tenths place, technically. All right. Let's do a couple more. Okay, watch this one. Actually, I'm going to put all 4 of them up. Okay, round each of these in your notes. I'll give you a couple minutes, maybe 90 seconds or so. Round each of these to the nearest whole number. That means we're looking at the ones place, looking to the right, and determining what we need to do in order to round that number up if it's 5 or above, or keep it the same if it's 4 or below. All right, for number 1, 1.44 rounded to the nearest whole number is what, Finn?
1.
Just 1. Okay? Just 1, because we look to the right, it's 4 or below, so we just ignore, and everything becomes a 0, giving us the whole number 1. Number 2, 19.66. 9.7 rounded to the nearest whole number becomes what? Bridget? 20. When we look to the right, 6 is bigger than 5, meaning we have to round the 9 up 1. So it goes to 10. We add another digit there. So 19 goes to 20. Good. Number 3, 15.014 rounded to the nearest whole number. Sophie, what'd you get?
I got
15. Very good. Okay, we look to the right. It is 0. That means that 15 stays the same. It's not going to get bigger. It's going to stay the same. And finally, John, number 4, 91.921 rounds to what?
91.
So look to the right. 9 is bigger than 5.
So it'd be like 91.10.
Okay, so hold on. Look at you guys. Look at the 1, John.
Yes.
That's the place we're rounding to. 9 is bigger than 5. So the 1 we have to round up. We add 1 more. The 1 will become a 2 when we add 1 more. Right? And everything else becomes a what?
92.
So to the nearest whole number, this is 92. 92. In your notes. In your notes. Everyone should be writing. Round each of these to the nearest tenth. Round to the nearest tenth. Start by underlining your place value. The tenth is the first number to the right of the decimal place. Look to the right of the number that you underlined to determine whether you're going to add 1 to the underlined number or keep it the same. All right, let's look at number 1. 8.236 to the nearest tenth would be what? Natalie, what would number 1 be to the nearest tenth?
Number 1 would be 8.2.
8.2. Good. Does the 6 matter? No, it does not. Only the one underlined and the one to the right. So 8.2 would be to the nearest tenth. All right, number 2. Hazen, what did you get for number 2?
51.7.
Perfect. 51.7. It stays the same because it has a 1 to its right next door. What about number 3? 9.66. Finn, what'd you get?
9.7.
Good. We round up because the 6 was bigger than 5. So 9.7. And finally, number 4. 59.42 becomes, Vika?
59.4.
Good. 59.4. It stays the same. Okay, let's do one more round and then we'll be done. Okay. Now we are rounding to the nearest hundredth. Okay, so we're underlining the hundredths place. These are longer numbers. Okay, the hundredths place is 2, the second number, the second digit to the right of the decimal place, your hundredths place. Okay, and then you're going to look next door to determine whether that underlined digit will add 1 more or whether it will stay the same. All right, let's look at number 1. Number 1, 308.8174, rounded to the nearest hundredth. Caroline, what'd you get?
308.82.
Very good. Okay, we look next door. It's bigger than 5, so the 1 rounds up to 2. 308.82. Number 2, 68.883. Nicholas, what'd you get?
I got 6.8.
Good, 6.88. We look to the right. 3 is less than 5, so the 8 stays the same in our hundredths place. Number 3, 66.935. Brady, what'd you get for number 3?
I got 66.94.
Very good. So we rounded up the 3 because of the 5 next door. 0.94. And finally, 0.196. Hazen, tell me what you got.
0.110.
Close. So your idea is right because you looked next door and you saw, well, that's bigger than 5, so I need to round up. However, when you round up that 9 to 0, we also need to then look one more to the right, because look at this number here. This is really a 19, right? Do you see that?
Yeah.
And so when we round the 9 up, we need to go from 19 to 20. 20. So instead of having a 1 here,
That one was tricky.
that was tricky. This tenths place goes to a 2. Because we go from 19 to 20. Does that make sense? So sometimes you have to look one more to the left when you're rounding from a 9 to a 0. You look one more to the left and round from the 1 to the 2, or whatever that digit is in the tenths place. Okay? So then the simplest would just be 0.2. You can put the 0.20, but you don't have to. All right.